if that's okay with everyone. Thanks, Joyce. So I'm going to call this special town meeting to order of the of December 2nd at 2022. And just making sure this is sort of our inaugural use of our new system for recording. So this is only for recording purposes. And just some quick housekeeping for everybody. Please keep in mind that the meeting is being audio and video recorded. The microphones are sensitive. So if you're chatting quietly, your conversation may be picked up by the microphones and recorded. So if you do want to have a small chit chat with somebody, maybe go outside or understand that it may actually be recorded. So for each topic, we'll ask the representatives to come up, present any information, and then we'll do a question and answer. Between the two topics, we'll do a 2-minute break so that we can shuffle the deck chairs. If you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, we ask you to come up to the podium so that we get everything on the recorded Zoom. And I think that's everything. I will entertain a motion to waive the reading of the agenda.
I move to waive.
Thank you, Karen. Do I have a second for that?
Second.
Seconded by Fran Goodsell. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. All righty. So we're going to invite Jen Duncan and Scott Trabucco from the Board of Ed to come up and join us at the table. Sure.
It's nice to have some company.
Thank you.
We have a couple of slides to present, so we're going to put those on screen share so we have it for the recording. Maybe 1 second. This morning.
We can begin. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Scott Trabucco. I'm the chairman of the Kent Board of Education, and this is Jen Duncan. She's the secretary of the Kent Board of Education, and Eric Epstein, who is our town's deputy emergency manager. Tonight, we're going to present our proposal for an SRO for Kent Center School. We're going to describe the process that we went through when making the decision and the factors that we considered. We're going to discuss the financial impact to the town. We will answer any questions that you have about our proposal. And I just want to remind everybody that we had a Board of Ed special meeting at Kent Center School on November 15th, presenting basically the same presentation, but the questions may be different than tonight. So if anybody's interested in watching that, that can be found on the town website under minutes and agendas. And it can also be found on the Board of Ed website, which you can get through through the KCS website. Okay, so how did we get here? What brought us to this decision and this consideration? At the June meeting of the Kent Center School Safety Committee, which includes, it's made up of staff at KCS. It's Eric Epstein is on the committee. Andrew Fisher, our resident trooper, is also on the committee. And me and Jen were also at this particular meeting in June. We discussed at the end of the meeting, it was a regular safety meeting. And at the end of the meeting, we began discussing some concerns we had received from parents. This was right after the shooting in Uvalde. And there were some questions about our safety procedures and what kinds of things we were considering. We also discussed the fact that we live in a rural community. We don't have our own police department. We rely on Troop L. We discussed response times from Troop L and how they compare to the average duration of these shooting incidents. These shooting incidents are usually over very quickly, and response times can, be rather large sometimes here at Kent. And we also discussed the increasing incidence of gun violence across the country, not just in schools, but in lots of other public places. At the end of the meeting, we went around the table and the committee unanimously endorsed or recommended that the Kent Board of Education consider hiring armed security for Kent Center School. And Jen's going to go through that process of how we handled it on the board.
Thanks, Scott. Go to the next slide. Okay, I'm actually gonna look at this one because I feel like. So when you talk about security within a school, there's really two options. There's something called an SRO, which is a school resource officer. And there's something called an SSO, a school security officer. I'm gonna go through sort of the differences between the two because understanding the differences is really important. So for the SRO, that individual is post certified. They have to be an active duty trooper. They're fully equipped with a cruiser, a rifle, and a handgun. One of the really important factors that we think is important is the direct radio contact with Troop L. Supervision, so the individual will be fully managed by Troop L. If they're out sick, if they're on vacation, if they are unavailable for any reason, Troop L will be responsible for providing a substitute. Troop L will handle all the insurance, all the training, everything that is required with this individual will be handled by Troop L. The cost to the town for a full year is about $200,000. This note at the bottom, we think is very important just in the interest of being transparent. So in the event of a serious emergency within either the Kent town limits or surrounding areas, this individual could be called to respond out of the school to one of these, to a serious emergency. We've been assured that this would not be every, fender bender in town. It would not be for minor calls. It would be, again, we're using the term serious emergency. It's also, that would be managed by Troop L, and the dispatchers and management at Troop L would make that decision. But it is a possibility, so we wanted to be transparent about it. The SSO is typically a retired police officer. So they're no longer active duty. They carry a limited capacity handgun, no car, no radio contact with Troop L. They would have to pick up a phone and dial 911, just like any of us sitting in this room would have to do. As far as the supervision goes, it would all be on the town and the Board of Education and management within the administration within the school building. So if they're out sick or they, were on vacation, it would be up to, school administration to find coverage. No car, everything that comes with the benefits of the supervision under Troop L would fall on the town. The cost to the town in that scenario is between $80,000 and $100,000. And that's just for the school year. You're talking, is that even 9 months, 180 days?
180 days.
So, yeah, okay. All right, G, you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, considerations that led the Board of Ed to choose yes or that. So we really have talked about all of those, but the management being done by Troop L is very important. The ability to respond
Two other major emergencies within the town of Kent. Direct contact with Troop L, again, not having to pick up the phone, just having to open their mic on their radio. It solves a need for the town when school's not in session. And then the post certification and ability to carry more than a handgun. Okay, next.
So after we went from the safety committee to the Board of Education, and the Board of Education decided to recommend the hiring of an SRO. I went to the Board of Selectmen. I explained our proposal. That we were asking for the town to contract with another trooper from Troop L to serve as an SRO during the school year and as a second resident trooper in town when school is not in session. We felt that we had been aware that there had been a push to, or an attempt to try to bring more police presence to town during the summer to deal with the increased traffic that we're facing, the big crowds down at Bulls Bridge and up north at Kent Falls. But the fact that it was only needed for a few months a year made it difficult to solve that problem. And we thought combining these two together would solve both of them at the same time. The Board of Selectmen voted unanimously to support our proposal and to partner with us to bring this to the Board of Finance. So after that, we went to several Board of Finance meetings. They were very patient with us and twice approved bringing this issue to the voters like we are tonight. Then we went back to the Board of Selectmen to get the vote scheduled, which is now scheduled for the 15th of this month, December 15th. And as I mentioned earlier, we held an informational meeting at Kent Center School on November 15th. Next slide, please. So what does the data say? It's difficult to find studies that measure the deterrent effect an SRO can have in a school. There's several reasons for that. SROs are not required to register with any national database. Police departments are not required to report how many of their officers work as an SRO, and schools are not required to report how many SROs they employ. So it makes it very difficult to gather large pools of data without self-selecting as you're trying to form a study. What it is possible to measure is the incidence of gun violence in schools and the financial impact that this would bring to the town. So Jen's gonna outline those for us.
Okay, so I'm going to preface this by saying we recognize both of these slides are very busy. They're a little hard to read. There's a lot of information down at the bottom. The bottom is really sourcing. So, you know, what we really want to focus on is this looks at a 20-year span from the 2020 to 2020, sorry, 2000 to 2001 school year, all the way up to 2020 to 2021. Okay, so a 20-year span. And it looks at the number of public, this slide looks at the number of public and private elementary and secondary shootings in that, in that time period. And really what we're focusing on is the trend line. You know, that's really the story that we want to highlight. Okay. So on the next slide, please. Thank you. I love your little red marks. Is this the second one?
I don't.
No. So the first is the number of schools with shootings. The second one is the number of shootings. So
There we go.
is that the next slide?
Nope,
No. Okay.
I'm stuck a little bit. Just gonna unshare and then share again. Make sure that we're on the right one. I'm stuck. Very strange. For 1 second. Being cranky.
It's great when it works.
We could maybe just talk about them.
Yeah, I mean, we can, oh, look at that. Okay. So this is the number of school shootings in the same time period, with casualties, not always deaths, but injuries and then deaths. So the lighter green at the top is shootings with injuries. The bottom, includes deaths. But again, really what we wanted to show here is the trend line. We can go on to the next slide, Jean.
Getting stuck here. All right.
Okay, so I want to be very clear when I talk about this slide. Scott and I put this slide together. We have confirmed the accuracy of the numbers. We are not the Board of Finance or the Board of Education, but we feel that it's important that this information be communicated, so we've included it in our slide deck. All of this information is as of right now. Okay, so please understand that as we review this information. So right now, based on the current grand list, 1 mil is approximately $600,000. So if the mill rate were to increase as a result of this proposal passing, $200,000, which is the value of, the cost of an SRO for a full year, would be approximately 1/3 of a mil. We're not suggesting that the mill rate's going to increase. We're not suggesting that it could only increase by 1/3 of a mil. This is just an effort to give some context to the cost. If the mill rate were to increase by 1/3 of a mil, for folks who have property assessed at $500,000, the increase in your tax liability would be approximately $170. If your property is assessed at $300,000, you would see an increase of approximately $100. So again, the reason for doing this is just to give some context to what $200,000 means to individuals in the context of your tax liability or obligations.
So what do the other schools in the area do? In Region 1, currently, there are no other schools that employ an SRO. We're the first one to be asking for one in the region. But many towns in Connecticut already do employ SROs, including many around here in this area. According to a recent survey conducted by the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents back in the spring of 2022, approximately 2/3 of the 92 responding districts currently employ an SRO or SSO in their school. Our superintendent called around to area schools to find out what they were doing and found the following. Region 20, which includes Litchfield, Warren, Morris, Goshen, has 1 SRO, currently seeking to add 1 more. New Milford has 2 SROs and 2 SSOs. Region 7 has 1 SRO. Region 12 has 1 SRO, currently seeking to add 1 more. Region 14 has 4 SROs. Torrington has 2 SROs. And Region 10 has 1 SRO. Thank you. Next slide.
Okay, so roles and responsibilities of an SRO. Responsible for maintaining awareness and control of the school's perimeter. Really important that everybody understands that the intent, our intent and the school's administration, the school administration's intent in making this request is to have this individual serve as a mentor to staff and students. This person's responsibility would not be to handle discipline of students, except in the event that a trooper would have been otherwise called, of course, but the day-to-day activity is not to handle discipline, and we want to be very clear about that. And then, we'd like to build some programs in conjunction with the school administration that the SRO would be able to share with students. Okay, so if this were to pass, what does the process look like? What has to be done? So the town of Kent, Jean, would make a formal request to the Connecticut State Police. We would then go through a process where we work through the terms and conditions of the contract. And this could take, we want to be honest about the timeframe. It could take a couple months, it could take a few months before it's completed. Okay, so there will be a referendum on December 15th, 12 to 8 here in this room where the referendums always take place. We do want to, and there'll be a conversation about this as soon as we're done, but important to note that the referendum also will include the EMS staffing question. It's not just the SRO.
Okay, great. Thanks. So we're going to move to the question and answer. And again, we ask you to come up to the podium and state your name. Be terrific. We'll just take it. Yeah, hands up for people who have questions. Come on up, Marty.
Hi, I'm Marty Lindenmeyer with 51 Elizabeth Street, right across from the school. Former chairman of the school board a year ago. First question for you, Jean. How many instances has our trooper responded to where there's been threat to a student or a student of student age 18 and below in our town in last year?
I'd have to ask the troop.
They don't
I have that. I don't have that specific information for an age grade, for an age range that you're asking, but I can.
We have minors versus right, seniors and people, but you don't have that information.
I don't. Not at the tip of my.
What is the specific threat we can identify that's occurred in the last 4 or 5 years to Kent specific, either even in the prep schools as well as this, because this is for the elementary school only, right?
Well, may I jump in on that one?
Sure.
This is specifically for Kent Center School, but it would be a sworn police officer that would respond to standing right now. God forbid a shooting at Kent School, if this trooper would be able to respond to that, or at the nursery school.
So he would leave his responsibility at Kent Center to go to respond to another school.
They're a sworn police officer, and if there were a shooting in town, yes, they would be responding.
Okay, how often has our trooper currently been called off for other instances outside of the town of Kent during his normal work hours?
I don't have that information.
You're not prepared to answer this question.
Well, I don't have that.
Well, I'm saying you're not prepared to answer those kind of questions about what our current use of the police officer we currently have that we're paying for. Okay, that's a probably good idea to have that information. How many instances have we had in the school as a school board in the past, I don't know, a couple of years at all of weapons being brought in that have been identified by anyone as a staff member of Kent Center School?
There was one several years ago. A student
How long
brought one
ago?
in.
Several years.
It was several years, but this is not in response to a specific incident. This is more in
No, I'm
response.
talking about threat. I mean, if there's kids are routinely being found with
Kids are
knives,
not routinely coming
other
up with
things
things like that.
So there's no specific,
That is,
your data is for how many in Connecticut itself?
I'm sorry.
The data you put on there, I couldn't quite see
That was
graph.
national.
The national, but how many in Connecticut?
We didn't break it out to Connecticut. We're trying to, I mean, I don't really think that, it's not like the weather, where there's a storm forming in New York and it's coming into Connecticut. It's a national, we believe, rise in gun violence that we're concerned about.
Is it just gun violence or is it mental health as well?
Well, mental health is certainly a part of that, and that's certainly a part of what.
The instances we've had since 2012 involve personnel in Connecticut that were under mental health issues, correct? And known to the school district
I think often these kids, yes, have exhibited signs beforehand.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we have nothing to date that we know of.
We're not asking for an SRO because we have a specific child in the school that we're worried about.
No,
or-
no, Trent,
We're
I mean,
also not privy to that information, even if we, I mean,
No, we have.
it's not,
counselors.
we can't share that
We
publicly.
have counselors. Well, I'm not asking for individuals. I'm asking for.
But that wasn't the driving motive.
Deal with children that have issues or whatever.
There's certainly been a rise in the draw on the RSSC for,
But
support.
is that related to COVID more than?
I mean, I don't know what it's related to, but
Well, the national trend is COVID. It's causing more problems than certainly any issues with our school system. And
I don't think it's a problem with our school system that's causing the problems. You're right. I agree.
so you mentioned twice, Jen, about it has a car. Maybe this trooper would have a car. What does that mean? Just so that they respond to other incidents,
Well,
because
again,
they're in the
they're-
school. They're still in the school. They're in the school during the day, correct?
So I'll follow up on that. So a trooper would need to be able to be mobile. So in.
Right, and leave the school again.
Just give me 1 second. So if there was an incident in the school and if the person came in a car, arrived in a car and was either at the school or an incident happened and they got in their car and left, then the trooper would have the availability to go and find that person rather than being stuck at the school without having any mobility. That's.
I'm going to ask Eric this. In response to an incident at a drive-by shooting, what's the most secondary important thing to maintain in an incident such as that? All right, I've been trained 34 years in counterterrorism and terrorism. I teach a master's program in Homeland Security, and I deal with this every day in my education. You must maintain your presence at your location. You do not abandon your presence, because very often we see people shooting, someone follows them, and then there's a follow-on attack at the site. Correct. So the important thing would be to maintain, not to travel after someone, would be to call your backup, Troop L or whoever, to pursue, identify the vehicle, call it in, because you said they have the.
And Marty, that would be a decision from the troop. We wouldn't be making those calls of.
Correct. I'm telling you what the training is, though, that the trooper. will probably-
So, and very likely, you're right, that the trooper might remain at the school in a situation like that. The troop might tell them.
All right, but, all right, so in the past couple of years, how much money have we spent on improving the defensive position, if you will, or physical security of the school itself?
I think it's over the past several years, it's been about $150,000.
220,000 actually, a total amount since we started. And
Some very good improvements.
Yeah, we have,
improved that vestibule. That was a great improvement. That was
vestibule, the windows, the doors, we improved that across the board. I mean, we have great help from the people in the community to do that. How can you guarantee that you're not going to have someone just driving down by the school in any of the streets that are open? I mean, there's Elizabeth Street, Meadow Street, Judd Avenue. I mean, those are public schools, they're public streets. You can't limit or avoid that. But when we looked at putting in the physical security things of the school to improve the situation, we took that into consideration, did we not? People driving in.
I'm not sure I understand. People driving down
I'm
Elizabeth.
saying we improve the security of the school itself to deny anyone outside the school, an outside individual, to be able to approach it and go inside the school to cause problems. Isn't that,
That's the intent, absolutely.
that was the accomplishment, I believe, wasn't it?
I hope so, yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, it's, I really don't want to get into a discussion about specific security. We have to be, careful, but it's not impenetrable, I mean, it's not just because we have made a lot of improvements and you deserve a lot of credit for that. But I believe that, this is a responsible.
Well, if there was
addition
a
to that
credible threat,
security.
there might be, but there is no credible threat.
I don't
that
think there's
occurs-
ever been a credible threat in any of these shootings.
Well, our credible threat would be someone.
I want to give everybody an opportunity
But
to ask
we're talking about
questions.
Marty, can I just?
We're into a discussion versus questions.
Correct.
that you have.
But our current trooper is on a rotating schedule where it's 5 days, Monday through Friday, Tuesday through Saturday, et cetera, correct?
So
This individual would be always available.
Monday through Friday. Yep, that would be part of the MOU process that we would go through if it was approved when we were forming the contract.
Then why can't we have that same MOU with our current state trooper to provide that Monday through Friday?
I mean, that's that's not.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have heard that. I'm sure it's got to be ready. If we
So-
could have done that with our current trooper to provide, coverage during the days the school's in session.
I'm not sure that would work for the town, though. I mean, Trooper Fisher's pretty valuable here on the weekends for the town,
But he's not here every weekend. He's often not on.
Yeah, he's not, but
I guess I don't understand the
Right.
question. He's on a rotating schedule.
Current Trooper Fisher, our current state trooper, has a rotating work schedule. 5 days.
5 3 off.
3 off, and it could be maybe out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right, then on weekends. But if this other trooper comes in, they're not under the same rotational schedule.
Correct.
Why aren't we looking at the importance of the school, of the children of our school during Monday through Friday already, with one trooper we already have contracted with to get that same MOU so that individual is here during the school days. And then you do often your summer schedule, which is what you guys have in secondary response for the second individual is to work traffic on weekends, summertime when school's off, correct? Why couldn't we do the same thing with Trooper Fisher, put him on that Monday through Friday schedule?
Because, well, he's the resident. We could, but
I'm not sure that would really be a good idea for the town to
right,
Why not? But during the.
never have a trooper here on the weekend.
We have a revolving police presence with our resident state trooper. That's not just Monday through Friday, that there are times where his Monday is a Saturday, so that his days are shifting, and it just makes sense to have that revolving schedule, because we also have the back, so on his days off, we have the Patrol 1 trooper. So there's that Patrol 1 that covers Warren, Washington and Kent on his days off. So there is some coverage. It's just not.
But I'm saying if the importance is our protecting our children at school, if there's a chance that we could have an MOU to put our one resident trooper in a schedule that actually mirrors the school schedule until the schools no longer in sessions such as holidays, summertime, and so on, and then can get on the rotating schedule. Why isn't that the most beneficial?
But what they're trying to solve is an additional person.
Well,
What we have right now is not enough, right? That's why they're requesting,
one individual to be in the school, which is the most important piece.
right? That wouldn't affect the current resident state trooper coverage that we have. So it's a second.
I'm saying, why bother with the second one when we should be doing this exact same thing with our first one? If the students are the most important part of our town, which they are, our children.
So you're suggesting taking the trooper we have and using him as an SRO?
And then
I don't think the town would be happy about that.
why not?
Parking Andrew Fisher at the school.
He's there most mornings. I see him most mornings there.
He's there several mornings, but for a
But
little.
what else? The town is.
I'm just trying to figure out what you're suggesting. You're suggesting that he stays at the school all day?
Well, that's.
That we get rid of.
We would be open to that, but I just don't think the town would.
Program and just have an SRO Monday through Friday during the school.
If this concern.
I would say.
The concern is that we have more coverage at the school because of the rising national level, not necessarily anything in Connecticut or anything that there's a real threat here, but we think that nationally we need to have that coverage because of the national, something involving Texas. Then, yeah, that would say, let's reassess, reallocate our resources that we currently have to cover that first before we jump into having a second one.
We need the residents that we have.
I'll get back to, I asked you questions
Additional.
about what this resident trooper does as far as the restaurant concerned. You don't have that data. So how valuable is he if we don't know how well he's doing? How many tickets has he given in the past year? Traffic moving tickets.
So I don't know, but,
All right, I'm done.
but no, Marty, if you can't ask the question, right, but.
As a chief executive, to answer simple questions. The reason why we need.
If you let me finish, he responds to about 4,000 requests for service a year. I don't have the details on what, on a breakdown. And the concept of a law enforcement officer is only as good as the number of tickets that he writes is a very provincial, very old fashioned way to think about the performance of law enforcement, because they, hang on, just let me, I gave you a lot of time of the floor. But the concept and model of community policing is not about the number of tickets a resident state trooper writes. It's the investigations, all the other activities that they're doing, in addition to the ticketing, absolutely. But there's this holistic community policing concept, and it's not about the number of tickets a state trooper.
I understand that, but your secondary reason for running the second trooper is to put them on highway patrol for speeders or weekend, other traffic, which I assume is traffic of.
Or the crowds. I mean, there's a wide range. I live down by Bulls Bridge.
The duties of a regular resident state trooper in those off months from the school year.
Right, well, that's exactly what I'm saying. If the community policing is the most important thing we do, so we're not worrying about ticket numbers and so on, put our current resident trooper in the school, use our resources wisely. When the conditions are such that he's no longer needed in school because of vacation time, summertime, whatever, where the traffic actually increases, then then put him on the same type of schedule we currently have it, which up to the issue of the issue at school. There was no issue, there was no request ever before about a second trooper. There might have been thoughts of it. I'm not gonna say I didn't, it's not there, but
Yeah, I mean,
we can cover.
there was the Noise and Traffic Committee all summer long looking at this.
Right?
There was the Noise and Traffic Committee all summer long looking at this, issue of trying to bring more police presence into town. So, I mean, you said it hasn't been brought up, but
Okay, well, then let's, okay, I don't understand. I don't understand why you combine the SRO for the school with summertime policing, regular.
because we would need to contract for the full year.
You can't contract us for a school year.
Understand now why you brought that up is the second reason. If you want the town to do that, you should have the town ask for that specifically. I mean, if the town,
It's a joint proposal between the Board of Selectmen and the Board of
but
Education.
it didn't originate with the board of selectmen, originated with the board of education.
So it was our idea, you're right, yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Mike, come on up.
Mike Dowell, for anyone who doesn't know me. May I please see the comparison of the SSO and the SRO?
Sure.
Can you speak up?
I'll help you with this. People think I'm yelling, but
It's a balance.
What? I would also have to agree with, while we're waiting for this, with Marty. I don't see anything pointing to the fact that we need this. I don't see any.
If I could, just one thing, I mean, just as a matter of like tone for the evening, we're not here to convince you of, that our opinion is better than your opinion. This is our proposal. This is after considering it, at the Board of Ed, this was the decision we came up with. This is what we think is right thing to do. We think this is the responsible thing to do. If you don't agree with us, that's absolutely fine. And that's why it's going to a town vote. We're all going to get a chance.
I'm not here to agree or disagree. It's just, we're having a discussion, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not a matter of agreeing or disagreeing. It's, I see things differently than you, and I think people need to hear those different views.
I think
sat here,
absolutely.
yours.
I absolutely think, we need to hear your opinion.
So I happen to agree with Marty, and I don't see the urgency of it. I understand that there was $220,000, as Marty mentioned, to secure the school. You can't get in the place. I don't see any way of getting in the building unless someone's got a car or a torch or whatever. It's secure. So I don't think there's anyone in this room who would disagree that the people who do these shootings are sick people.
Absolutely.
Okay, no argument there. Okay, now what happens when you put two sick people together? And one of them goes and causes a ruckus somewhere else, draws your SRO away, and then the other one goes to do his thing.
I think if you had two people and no SRO, it would be even worse.
I don't believe that. I've been unfortunate enough to come on this summer, be the first guy on 2 accidents, called them in. Within no time, there were 2 troopers there. Neither one of them was an SRO.
Yeah.
So we don't need the SRO to be the second guy on the job because they already supply it. We
Yeah,
already pay the taxes.
You don't want an SRO to be the second guy on the job in town. We're communicating to you that that's what the, troop has told us, that we're sworn police officers, we have the right to pull them out in an emergency.
I understand that, and that's my point.
Well,
They have the
I
right
agree,
to pull them
we
out,
don't need.
And they already send someone to emergencies or accidents or whatever.
I'm not gonna argue with that. I'd rather the SRO stay at the school all the time.
So looking at these, why would the SSO need a car?
I don't think the SSO would need a car.
Okay.
I think.
Why would the trooper need a car if he's
Can I-
other than having to leave for another emergency?
I think the benefit, and to be completely honest, I don't think the car is the biggest benefit, but I think what people feel the car would do is act as a deterrent, with the car parked out front all day.
The vehicle for the SRO acts as their mobile office. Their MDT is in there. All of their equipment, supplies, weapons are secured in that vehicle. And that's part of the turnkey
So now.
program from the state.
Our SRO in the school with his shotgun locked in his car,
No, it would be in the school.
really?
Yes,
Okay,
that's for sure. We checked that.
moving on. I think that $200,000 is a lot. I think that,
It is a lot.
yes, I saw your tax thing. $100 or $170 or whatever it may be.
Not nothing.
Any individual in these times when I'm paying double for diesel fuel.
I'm paying probably more than $170 a month in gas right now. I hear you. I
I
know.
just spent $800 a Monday and I'm gonna spend another $600 tomorrow.
Yeah, so can we keep it to the question?
I agree.
There's taxes. I don't care if you're raising the taxes $100, $170 or $5,000. Times are not good to be raising taxes. Times are not good to be spending more money for anybody.
They're never good to raise taxes,
Let's let him,
Times are never good to raise.
Scott, let's let him finish his comment.
Let him talk. I want to discuss it with you.
You said that taxes might go up. They're gonna go up. How do you think we're gonna pay for it?
Yeah, I think they will go up.
Of course, they're gonna go up. Okay, now, I'm just making examples. I'm in construction. On January 1st, I'm gonna pay another 2.5 cents per mile for each of my trucks because I drive with a diesel.
Yeah.
And I work for a living out in the field. Anyone else want to pay that for me? Along with the new tax for this? I'm sorry, I don't believe it. The SSO, if you gotta do something, why not that?
We felt that it was, the SRO provided a greater value. We felt like spending $100,000 for a retired cop with a handgun that would not be allowed to respond to an emergency in town, would not provide the town with as much value. I thought that would be not as good a use of money.
Otherwise, our town was so.
There are other costs that come with an SSO that are part of the SRO package. A big one is the body cam and the data that comes with that body cam, the body worn cameras that they're required to have. So the town would be responsible for purchasing, maintaining. They would have to purchase the camera, the backup camera, same thing if there was a dash camera. And we have to house, store, and make available for public requests, all of that data. And you're talking about terabytes and terabytes of,
That's not included in
video.
the 80 to 100,000 here.
I'm sorry,
That's not included in the 80 to 100,000.
no, the 80 to 100,000 would just be the salary for the person.
And how much, does anyone know how much a state trooper gets paid for annually?
I think it varies based on their level of experience. But the 200
Based on seniority.
Well, I doubt they get paid 200, because the state's charging us 200.
Yeah, I mean, it goes over, it goes to the management.
Right, and there are things like they have overtime that's built into their packages. It's all under the collective bargaining agreement because they're union employees.
Well, I doubt that they're even making 160,000.
I don't know what they're making, but they're not making.
My point is, if you want to pay for half a year, you think it's going to cost us $80,000 to $100,000
For an
6 months?
For an SSO,
Yes.
well, it'd be more than 6 months. It'd be the school year. And I do think that's what it would cost. That's what, we looked into with.
And another concern is vacations. School teachers can't take their vacations during the school year, can they?
I don't know. I didn't hear the vacation part, but I think
You had up here that if
yeah,
one of the
but I
problems
think,
with SSO is that they might take their vacation or they might get sick, or
I think it was more like
why would they be
sick
allowed to
days.
take a vacation during the 6 months period that they would be working as an SSO?
It's longer than 6 months, but I wasn't.
28 days.
Yeah, I wasn't speaking of vacations. We're more concerned with if they call out sick, there's no SSO that day. If they go for their yearly training, there's no SSO that day. When you have one person,
No bench. is
yeah,
what
there's no,
Saying with the Connecticut State Police, if someone gets sick, injured, if they have to go for required training and required weapons training, that has to, under the collective bargaining agreement, happen during their duty time, then we get another troop. Just right now, if Andrew has to go out on training or if he's sick, then we get another trooper. But if it was an SSO, it would be one person. And if that person is sick, they get injured, if they, get injured on the job and they're out for 3 weeks, there's no bench. There's no other people for us to draw from.
Mike and I said vacation, and I probably shouldn't have used that term, but again, if they have to have surgery and they're going to be out for 6 weeks, or they get injured or what, I mean, anytime that my point was anytime that they're not available to be at work.
My guess is if they get injured, it'd be falling on the ice on the concrete.
that might be.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Mark, come on up.
Hello, my name is Marco Balasone. Thank you for your time being here tonight. I just have a couple of questions. We, as a town of Kent, have a contract with a resident state trooper, Trubel. Is that a recurring contract that happens every year?
It's a 2-year contract.
2 years? Okay, so does it renew every 2 years, or is there like potential for change?
It renews every 2 years.
Every 2
Oh,
years?
right.
Okay, and then I just had one more question regarding the data that was on the bar graphs.
Yep.
Does it, I saw a lot of numbers, but I was also wondering if there was a breakdown of like what time of year that these attacks happen.
Not in that graph. I know those, to be completely honest with you, nobody was happy with those charts in the slideshow. There were a lot of numbers. They were broken out in the first one by level of school, elementary, high school, that's why there were so many numbers. But those graphs did not include time of year. It was all year or all school year, the whole school year.
Does anybody know what percentage of attacks nationally may be happening in the summertime in school? Off the top.
Those graphs only represented the school year. That I don't know, they didn't break it down to, winter versus fall. But
Okay,
those were just school year.
just a school year.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Speaking of the grass, I did have one question after the chance.
I'm gonna just call on what's had his hand up. Come on up. Sorry.
Well, I'm Westline. Along the same line, I thought the bar graph was very interesting. Because what it indicated was that there was an increase, then a decline, and then an increase. I guess my simple question is, if there is reason in the if we have another decline, once we've hired an SRO, can we back out? Because you're kind of basing it on the need for this because of the bar graph. So
Well-
what happens if it goes down?
Okay, so first, your question first, of course, we
Yeah.
could,
So can we back out?
of course, we
Once
could.
higher?
We-
Actually,
And
we could,
if I-
vision for that.
if I might add, I believe that it is an issue, and again, for voters to understand, which is if this number is in the school budget, we actually have requirements in the state requirements, which is, it's very hard to take it out once you have it in.
And it's,
So just to respond to what the actual question was.
I did respond to the actual question. We could absolutely end the contract at any time. What you're talking about is minimum budget requirements. We looked into this. We were concerned about this as well, because we don't want to put something in our budget that can't be taken out because of minimum budget requirements. This falls underneath minimum budget requirements. The truth is that number changes every year based on what your budget is, how many students you have, if your enrollment is increasing or decreasing. But we looked at this and we are comfortably under the minimum budget requirement. So it would absolutely be allowed to
I just know.
discontinue.
Once given something, it's very hard to.
Well, you're talking emotionally, I think, but
Well,
financially, I mean, we would not be required to keep it in by the state.
uh,
We would certainly be allowed to not renew the contract.
and who makes that decision?
The taxpayers, I guess,
So
if
when we
they,
go to another, I mean, we're gonna have a referendum on this, would be a referendum to remove.
no, it would be cut out of the budget, or, I mean, the Board of Ed could decide on their own to take it out.
Anyway, this just occurred to me when it's very indicative. I mean, there's no reason to assume.
And,
that
just,
we're
can I also-
Trim forever.
That's absolutely true. I mean, we don't know what the future holds.
Yeah.
And we didn't get this bar graph and then make the decision based on
Oh, I understand.
bar graph.
But that was part of it.
It wasn't really part of the decision. It's part of our presentation to try to, I think, there's a tendency, we all feel, I know I do, we hear about mass shootings every day on the news. Oh, there's another one in Virginia. There's another one in Texas. There's another one in Buffalo, and I think I'm a cynical person and I tend to say things like, it's just because they're highlighting it more, So we wanted to look at the data. There is a trend up, there is a trend in gun violence nationally. And that's all that graph is trying to show. It doesn't show that there's an attack that's going to occur in Kent. We don't have any imminent threat.
Right.
It's more of prudence, responsibility. We're responsible for the lives of those children and the staff. We have potentially long response times.
Right.
The school is not impenetrable.
So anyway.
It's the responsibility.
When I saw it, that's not sure.
Thank you for your comment.
Scott, just to dovetail on what you were saying. There is that line that the Department of Homeland Security at the state level has put in place since Sandy Hook. And part of the layer is to create those plans, right? So now every school in the state has to create an emergency plan. The physical securities that happen under Marty's tenure as the chair of the Board of Ed. And this is the next layer to that layered approach, if you will. Sort of just a dovetail on what you were saying. Chris Garrity, come on up.
Chris Garrity for the record. Thanks, guys. We've all been, many people have been in your seat, specifically the Board of Education, trying to wrestle with something that's not fun to think about, not pretty, tragedies and things that we've seen. But the way I look at this is speaking of Gene's layers, this is really just insurance. We're purchasing insurance. We purchased 250,000 of insurance roughly to secure the building. So my first concern is, and in a form of a question is, if you admittedly have impenetrable or not an impenetrable building, I think I would like to see that start first. Let's make sure it's impenetrable. And I think, given what I've read about some of the tragedies, many of them have been internal, meaning people have gotten in by, hi, I'm Chris, and carrying weapons. And I think that's really where we, the town, for the money that we spent already, need to know that security is impenetrable.
Yeah,
And a weakness I see, and I lived down there for 27 years. The kids going out to play for soccer or for recess, you can't protect that. Nobody can protect that. You can have some whack job in the woods picking off people. It just happens. So from the insurance perspective, the way I look at it is, okay, there are roughly 100,000 public schools in this town, in this nation. And Gene, can you pull up this? I could not read those numbers, but it looked like there were no more than 100.
That's right.
So from a percentage wise, if you're an actuary, you wouldn't even write this. And I get where you're coming from. I get it. I actually was the chair of the noise and traffic
I know.
that you stated. And we were not saying that we need extra policing for security of school. We're talking about, what we were talking about was traffic.
I didn't mean to imply that you
Okay.
were looking for.
And I don't see any sharing. I don't think that there's a way of doing that. So that's really 93. 93 incidences nationally with 100,000.
That's right. There's 93,000 schools. That's right. And 93,000. It's about 93,000.
Correct. Yes. And that's only public schools. There are private schools and
Yeah.
nurseries and all that. So I know it's hard, but I see this is a insurance policy. And I don't know if I'm personally ready to buy more insurance at this level. If it were something like 30,000, 40,000, in fact, maybe something to consider for all constituents here is talk to the state and say, you know what, why aren't you underwriting these programs?
That's certainly.
But that's just a thought. But getting to the specifics of the SRO, I've done very little research on it. I've read a little bit about it and what the general conclusion that I see, and I don't know if you guys have looked into this data or not, and I'd like to hear that, is that the SROs are very good at policing fights and incidences within the schools, but are not really, there's no data that supports that they can stop or prevent a mass casualty shooting. And so, again, from the insurance perspective, I don't see the numbers weighing right. So I guess in summation, that's really, it's more of a statement than a question. But the questions that I think you should maybe answer is, can you give us two things? One, something that says you can plug the leaks in the holes if you see them as holes security wise down at the school, number one. And number two, if you can give us some data that says, no, something like this is an insurance policy that will work. And that's what I would love to think.
So
Can I?
thanks. So nationally, there's not that data about, is there direct data about an SRO stopped an incident of school violence X percentage of the time? But the data that is out there is data like, I think it's 60% of the time, it's a large percentage of time, these school violence incidents happen and are done in less than 8 minutes. So if there is no school resource officer on hand at the school, and we're relying on either the resident state trooper who may be somewhere in town, Bulls Bridge, Kent Hollow, top of School Mountain, at another call, then it's definitely not likely that resident state trooper is going to make it back to the school in time to stop incidents of school violence. So while there's no direct data, there is data to support an on-site school resource officer.
That's how I think I mentioned that in my presentation, that there's really not a lot of federal level data that can be collected. You're right, there is no study that will prove that an SRO will keep us safe forever. There's also no study that proves that SROs are ineffective. To me, the way I think about it, if this is a difficult conversation, so excuse me for being graphic, but if there were a shooter at the school tomorrow, the first thing we would do is call the cops. So I don't really get the argument that placing a cop there doesn't make you safer. It's certainly no guarantee that nothing will bad weather. I mean, you're right. Somebody could be in the woods. I mean, we can't protect against everything. You know, we're doing our best. As far as being impenetrable, I gotta walk a really fine line here because we're not allowed to speak about security procedures in public. Okay, we have regular security committee meetings. We're focused on it constantly. There's many procedures in place that we've instituted since Newtown, you know, to increase the security of the school. But to really make it impenetrable would require bulletproof glass, which is far more expensive.
What was that?
Bulletproof glass, which is really beyond, I think, our means to support. It's an incredibly expensive thing. They looked.
You can't do it structurally in school.
I was just gonna say, they looked into it in Salisbury after Newtown. And it required a bunch of structural work. It was just out of reach, you know, that kind of solution. So when I talk about not being impenetrable, I'm not talking about leaks in our process. I'm just talking about, you know, we've done really everything the town can bear financially, structurally. I don't think it would be reasonable to ask the town to pay for a bulletproof glass throughout the whole building.
Follow-up question on that.
If you can come back up, just to ensure that we get everything on the recording.
I don't understand that line of thinking, primarily because
Which one?
be impenetrable. If it's, you're either impenetrable or you're not. And if you're saying that you can't ask the town for more funds because of that, you're asking the town right now to have a different type of impenetrable. And so
I didn't
follow
say.
my logic here. If you have to secure a roof and a window, and it costs too much money, so you have, so instead you hire a lesser effective maybe, or maybe a more effective
Yeah, I wouldn't.
individual with a rifle as a response. So again, you mentioned that it's not impenetrable. If you're going to say not impenetrable within reason, okay, but take that out. Is somebody, you can't be prepared for every single situation because clearly an SRO is not going to stop a shooting, but neither potentially the glass that you have right now won't either. So I think you secure the building.
Which we have.
Then if you have, why do we need an SRO? If you secured the building, and I spoke, Mike Gowell said it perfectly. Look, my wife was on the chair of the board. I used to go, Nance, we used to walk in, how you doing? Drop them lunch, drop them papers. Oh, they forgot this. That doesn't happen anymore.
You're absolutely right.
It's unfortunate, but we're all dealing with the realities of that. But if I can't get into the building, I don't know why some nut can get in the building or some other nut.
I think that's what I was. That's what I was kind of, you know, explain that. I can't get too specific, but
I don't need
You know,
specifics.
and
What
when
I need is you to fill the holes. And if you're telling me you have no holes other than the big things like super duper roof and impenetrable glass, then again, I go back to my insurance policy and say, if somebody's drilling through the roof, you ought to be able to get some cops there soon. If somebody's blasting through a window.
I don't think that's fair. Nobody's saying that somebody's going to drill through the roof.
Right, and I just want to jump in here on the whole concept of impenetrable, and now we're sort of hanging on that concept, but you have a building, right? So a building is a structure, and if, you know, to make it impenetrable, then what do you turn it into? And that there is a whole national conversation that has gone on since Sandy Hook in this balance in schools where schools are trying to strike a balance of safety. Obviously, that comes first, but how much do you trade off for that safety? The only way to make it completely impenetrable is to build it out of, you know, armor plated 7-foot thick concrete walls with no windows.
And even then, it's not impenetrable.
Right, it's still not impenetrable. Right, so my comment is that this layered approach to safety is the best practices approach. There is no perfection in any of this. There is no perfection.
Because it's like the sense that we need a defibrillator. So do you have one? Everybody has one in case somebody drops. Now, I don't want to be the guy to drop, not have a defibrillator, but within reality, you got to have only a certain through. So it was mentioned, I believe, on one of the slides, that some of the other surrounding towns are actually having additional SROs. So why aren't we here asking for 2?
Well, a lot
Why aren't we,
of,
no, but just, why aren't we asking for 5?
I can explain.
Mhm.
A lot of those towns with several have several buildings that they're covering. You know, we have one building. And I don't know that that's really, you know, logically, you know, why don't we ask for 100? I mean, it's not reasonable. You know, we're trying to, I recognize that you don't think it's reasonable what we're proposing, and probably most of the people in the room don't. But we are, believe it or not, trying to be reasonable and keep, you know, the safety of.
I would disagree with your comment. I think everybody in this building would love to see some sort of presence to make anything safe.
No, I said, I think, you think our.
At what point,
Is not
at
reasonable.
what point do you do that?
You're right. I mean,
And what number do you do that?
and this is going to be a judgment call, and that's why it's going to a vote.
Well, it's
You know-
true, and, but I just want to put it in terms of the construct of what we're dealing with, and these poor people, and you guys have to deal when it comes budget time. We have $250,000 or so for the ambulance that's moving forward. Our fire department, the reality is all the fire departments in the small rural worlds are going away, and we're going to have that. And that's the same kind of insurance you're buying. It's just a little bit different in sort of how it's made up. And I think that's, you know, I've sat there. It's not an easy decision when you're trying to weigh it.
It's
And,
absolutely not an easy decision.
Come on up, Marty. You know what, can you, I'm sorry, I just want to get a first round. If you don't, yep, come on up, Joe.
Good evening, Joe Agley. I'm a resident here in Kent. Anyhow, I support your proposal in spirit. Now, I was listening to, to what everyone else said and so forth. And I have a question about if the Education Board has ever approached this whole problem like on a regional basis, sharing an SRO with the other towns in the region. Has that approach ever come up?
No, it hasn't, because I don't know that the other towns would be amenable to that, number one, but I'm not sure that that would provide, you know, would increase our costs without providing much extra security. If we were sharing one trooper over 7 schools, I'm not sure how often that trooper would be at our school. You know, I'm not sure.
Well, the reason why I'm asking that is because I had read somewhere along the line that in some county in Pennsylvania, they have a pool of sheriffs that they will send to different schools, you know, as a resource. And I don't know what the resources are in the region here, but is that something that might, instead of doing it, going alone, is that something that could happen? You think?
So Pennsylvania has a county law enforcement system, like most other states outside of New England. So that would be, it would be difficult to accomplish because we don't have a county-based law enforcement system.
The region.
Well, no, so we have some towns have municipal police departments, and then like for our town, we have a resident state trooper. Some towns have no law enforcement. Warren has no law enforcement. So whereas Pennsylvania, there's in each of their counties, there's sheriffs, there's a model for every county to have that infrastructure. We don't have that here. So it would be a challenge to apply that here.
And I think, Jean, the other thing to add is that geographic size of Region 1, you know, the 6 towns that make up Region 1 is, I should know what the miles from, you know, north to south and east to west is, but it's big. I live in the farthest, almost as far south in Kent as you can get. And, you know, my daughter's in high school and has lots of friends in Canaan. It's a long drive.
Well, let me ask you this then. There is a board made in Region 1 part of the education department called the All Aboard Committee.
I'm on that board.
Run things.
Yes.
Okay, so they run things on a regional basis. What is that? Is that something that, you know,
It's the all board chairs committee you're talking about, I think the
Yeah.
ABC committee.
right?
They're fundamentally responsible for the RSSC budget, which, you know, they oversee. It's really the Region 1 board that approves all this. It's funny you bring it up because there's kind of a tension within that community. The Region 1 board feels like the ABC committee is really just a committee of the Region 1 board. Some people on the ABC committee feel like they're more important than that, but the design of the ABC committee was to kind of oversee the RSSC, the Regional Shared Services Center, which has things like, you know, help me with
The pupil
special,
services.
yeah, special education teachers, you know, that sort of thing.
And it's
So,
pre-kindergarten too, right?
yeah, and they run the pre-kindergarten
Yeah, central
program.
office salaries.
Right, the superintendent, the
They couldn't
assistant
be
superintendent.
involved with the SROs and that topic.
I think they would be allowed to be, but I'm not sure. I mean, that might be a long-term thing to think about. I'm not, are you suggesting building, you know, infrastructure with a building? And because with 7 schools to cover, I would think you would need 7 troopers. Or unless you're suggesting something different, because then otherwise you're really not gaining, you know, the extra security that we're proposing.
Well,
It's just so
I
much.
don't know about that. I mean, those are the details or anything. I don't know how many troopers they have. It's Troop L, or whatever it is, Troop L,
Yeah.
you know. But it's a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I know the other schools are aware that we're pursuing this and they don't seem interested in pursuing it themselves at this point. So I'm not sure that it
So
would.
Kent is going it alone.
And as far as regional, any school would have to go it alone with an SRO, yeah, but we're the first one in Region 1 to propose this. Yeah,
That's it.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Jean? Jean?
Oh, sorry.
I'd like to say something. So I want to share some information and then I have a couple of questions too that I'm not sure which of you will answer. When I was on the Board of Selectmen, we did ditch the resident trooper program at one time because it was very ineffective. And there were a few years there was no resident trooper in town at all. So that was a while ago. The question I had was, I wanted to ask, how many days or how many shifts, maybe is a better way to put it, will $200,000 buy the town of Kent?
I could answer for the school.
Well, I know that's 180 days because you just used the state number, right?
Yes,
But what's the total for the year, for the whole 200,000? What is that buying for us?
The shifts, I don't have that answer, sorry.
Because that would determine the coverage that, you know, you've been talking about that would be of assistance to traffic or whatever in the town. And also, do you have, you don't have summer school, do you?
not, yeah, we do, actually.
Okay, so would the trooper cover summer school?
I don't think so. I mean, you know, that could be a conversation, I guess, but that was not part of our proposal.
Okay, all right, so yeah, so that's another data point that is needed. And the last thing I want to say is, and for those of you who don't know, I've been involved with business operations in school districts now for about 20 years. Can't believe it's almost 20. And the number one issue with safety is access, period. And there are all sorts of wonderful plans out there to limit that. And they're very private for security reasons, but access is the number one issue. So, and finally, the Board of Selectmen did not, or Board of Selectmen, excuse me, the Board of Finance did not unanimously send this proposal to the town meeting.
I didn't say
The
that.
only, I know you didn't.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's all.
You didn't. You simply said that it was approved.
Yeah.
And we had to use that type of verbiage because that's what the lawyers required to move it to town meeting to have the constructive conversation that's going on this evening.
And I hope I didn't imply that.
You
there
didn't, you
was-
didn't.
No, but
And I didn't use the word recommend.
You
because
said
I know
approve.
that was.
You said, yeah,
but that's right. No, you described it correctly.
Yeah.
But I do
Allow the
want to,
voter.
Yeah.
I do want to chime in, because for all of you, I mean, I think our goal on the Board of Finance was, we looked at this and we said two things. One, this is something that the people can't have to decide. It's not going to be up to us. Our job is frankly twofold. One is really, we just have to be able to tell you that should you choose to do it, we can find the means of paying for it. Okay, that's what your Board of Finance does for you. Two is, frankly, and I've been harping on this, is in terms of recommending or not, are you getting value for money, which is something that you have to decide. I think as you said, the question is, at the end of the day, really you're talking about insurance. And the question is the price for that insurance worth what you're getting for it, right? You have to decide that. I think we can't. I think I personally, as a voter, have a point of view on it. But, at the end of the day, what we want to be able to do more than anything is equip you with the knowledge so that you can decide whether you want to go forward with this or not. And, and the only thing I would say is, and looking at the data, however, I do take some issue with the graphics that were shown. I think, as somebody pointed out, that chart with the upward trend was national. And that means you're treating the South Bronx the same as you are Kent, which of course is not a reasonable thing to apply that trend line to both in the same manner. So how much data are you getting out of that? Which is something, we have a concern with, that you can make an informed decision on. I don't think that chart helps you make an informed decision because it doesn't say small towns versus big towns versus major cities. And as you know, all kinds of crime statistics are like that. And in terms, so the only thing I would say is ask questions when from our perspective, all we did as a board is we said, we can find the money if you want it. But from our perspective, you got to remember, we almost came to fisticuffs over an taking $80,000 out of the school budget.
I don't think we almost came to.
No, I'm joking, but right, you and I might have.
We didn't take it out of the budget.
That's right. We decreased out of the increase.
That's right.
But the fact of the matter is, just in terms of contextualizing this stuff, we had,
Back to the,
I'm trying to help, we have to have people get educated about this stuff. Okay, we're not gonna send them off and then let them just they need to know it. And frankly, in terms of how you contextualize this, as someone said, $200,000 in the town of Kent, that's a lot of money. And we're all for protecting our children. And again, I don't have a point, but my job is, as is this board, is to make sure you have the tools to make that decision. But you got to know both sides, in order to do that. And then you make your own choice on it. $200,000 though is a lot of money. And the question is, are you getting value for it or not? You have to decide that. And, as you've been talking about, the school board has done a great job on a lot of things to secure things more. And the question is, incrementally for $200,000, how much value are you getting for that? Only you can decide that.
okay, thanks. Yes, thanks.
Hi, Alex Harris. I did attend the meeting in November, so a lot of my questions were answered then. My question is actually about the actual vote, so that actually was a helpful little background. So, and apologies for my lack of knowledge of local politics. So would the Board of Finance have had the authority to approve the 200,000 had they wanted to? No.
I think so, right?
No, it always would have had to go to a vote. Okay, so how does the vote work? Is there a minimum number? So resident taxpayers are voting. Is there a minimum number of votes? Is it just like, as long as it gets more yeses than no? Is there like how does that work exactly?
Correct. So the voting is based on just if there are more yeses than no.
So 10 people vote.
We don't have a 2/3 voting, so it is just if there's one more yes versus no, then it is a passed motion.
Regardless of, and how many voters are there?
That's up to the voters.
No, I mean,
What you're saying in the census, how many voters?
Is it
2,100 active voters at the moment, and also because it's a referendum, will be using people who own property.
Right.
And I don't have.
Okay.
So it's not
Okay.
just.
So any resident that has property
Any number of
that's $1,000 or more is eligible.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thanks. We're gonna continue with the first round. Gonna start in the back.
Sean Russell, a resident. Is the committee empowered to speak on behalf of Kent Center School employees?
Is me and Jen, or me?
Yeah.
Why don't you, I don't know, why
I think
don't
it
you ask your
depends on the
question?
context of the question.
Is it your sense or is it clear to you where the Kent Center employees stand? I'm referring to everyone who works at the building.
I don't know that it would be fair for us to, you know,
I think what
to
we can,
attempt that.
I think what we can say is there are staff members who sit on the safety committee, and that committee voted unanimous. I mean, it wasn't a
I mean,
vote,
and-
the committee
Yeah.
agreed unanimously. So there are staff members in that committee. I don't know.
well, in fact, it's only staff members except for Eric and Andrew.
Well, that's right.
And is the union involved at all of this?
No.
Take a position hasn't involved itself. Should the union be involved? Is there a place for the union in this dialogue?
I don't think so. They haven't expressed any concern to us. So I don't think so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan Gobble. I'm gonna go across the back. You're up next.
He's up for now. Hi, Alan Gobble. And I wasn't planning on asking any questions or anything, but with Marty and then a little bit of Mike and with Nancy, bringing some questions about, I thought it would be something that really would be of interest to look at there. We deal with this, meaning the reallocation or of your assets. So if we, as we've had for a while, no resident trooper, we've had for a while one resident trooper, meaning overall in the town of Kent. We've had for a while 2 resident troopers in the town of Kent. So, you know, looking at the concept that if this is maybe not, you know, directly your decision, but look at the impact or look at it from a board of selectmen standpoint and a board of finance, certainly board of education, whereas the trends and whatever you were discussing, you know, that this is a concern and a priority. Trying to expand maybe a little bit on what Marty was saying is that maybe it would be worthwhile to look at making the resident trooper a SRO for the town of Kent. So they would be school resource officer following the same plan that you have for this second position. Then during the summers, they would be doing the activities that the current resident trooper does during the summer. But during the school year, the 180 days, they are doing this priority, this thing that you guys have, you know, talked about as a safety factor, as an extra layer that Chris Garrity was talking about, you know, and so forth. I'm not informed enough to say that that is certainly a higher priority than what the job is that the current resident trooper is doing. But people were asking, you know, for statistics and so forth, so it certainly could be looked at. It's certainly, I couldn't agree with you more, Gene, it's not about ticket writing, you know what I mean, in today's environment. But it would, I think it'd be something to certainly investigate, because it's an expense we already have. And it would be, again, you know, reallocating that resource into maybe more of your priority area or your higher area of concern in that. So I would strongly encourage that to be looked at to see how that could be. It's also my understanding that for when there was discussion by some people here about sharing an SRO, right? And obviously the schools so far apart and so forth, and where you saw, you know, adding a second or a third, it's because they maybe have 2 schools in their town or 2 buildings, you know, they need to cover. So as you explained that, I think that was good. I you know, knew that. But the idea of a resident trooper can be shared. And as I recall, Nancy, maybe you would know, or Chris from previous board of selectmen, so that is something also I think was looked at, sharing it with another town. Maybe Kent and Warren, you know, shared one and was looked at maybe a little more aggressively a few years ago or something in that aspect. But so if we felt the need to have a resident trooper similar to what we have now, maybe that would be a shared, resource. So again, you had some revenue coming in to balance, but what is the crime rate or the availability of that, or the crime prevention probably is a better way of doing it, because I think a resident trooper prevents a lot of crime because, people talk and communicate and they have their boots on the ground, so to speak. But so it's just something that I really think, as I sat back there and thought about, I thought it'd be very, very important to look at because of the budget numbers and, with the impact, again, risk versus benefit. One other question, and I think you said you couldn't answer it, but just following on John's point about, the union or the facility, how do the teachers and the staff feel? Do they feel this is something that is a priority for them? Do they feel a sense of unsafeness in the school? And if you said, I don't think you can answer that. If I understood correctly, so maybe you can't, but I think that would be a big factor. In other words, I would hope that they would have a lot better sense and feeling of safety in their place of work based upon all the things that you described were done to the facility. But is there still that uneasiness or that sense, here being in a small town, things you talk about, the difference between the South Bronx and the difference between, I'll just use, Jason, your, words. Is there that sense that the people that are there every day, right? The people that are there, those doors are closed and whatever, that this is a real sense of that they need it, that it's something that's important to them in that sense of safety for them. I don't know whether, because it's grammar school kids, whether, they're gonna be able to make any of those, decisions or have an opinion on that. I mean, the hope is that our teachers and staff, which I feel very confident do, give them that sense and comfort level. So regardless of what's going on, the teachers and staff of Kent Center School make all of those students feel that comfort level, no matter what is happening. So I want to make sure that, again, those teachers and staff, that is this a priority for them? Or
I think maybe what we could fairly say is, it was a very strong sentiment on the safety committee made up of 5 or 6 staff members. And others that we have talked to personally expressed that same concern, but we have not canvassed the whole staff. We didn't get a yes or no from everybody. And I don't think it would be fair for me to classify people's feeling as a group, because there may be individual, feelings in there. And I don't think they would appreciate, me saying.
But what I'm hearing then is people that have been involved from the staff and faculty and teachers
were very strong.
Very strongly in favor of this happening.
Yes.
Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement.
Thank you.
Hi, Tom Hayes. How long is the contract? I mean, you're coming to the town now, but they're not probably, if it goes through, won't start until January.
I think I can anticipate your question.
So why are you asking for 200,000?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it was actually suggested that we ask for less. I was very adamant that we asked for 200 because we didn't want there to be any misunderstanding. We didn't want there to be a miscommunication for people who maybe didn't attend this meeting and, to think if we're only asking for 100,000, that's going to be the yearly cost. So you're correct that by the time, if this does pass, by the time we're able to contract, it'll be significantly less than $200,000 for this budget year. But we're asking for the 200,000 because we want to be absolutely clear that that is the ongoing cost we're asking for. There would be a $200,000 yearly commitment from the town. And I was very nervous that if we didn't highlight that $200,000 number, that there'd be room for misunderstanding. And I didn't want that to happen.
Okay, so then the question then becomes to the Board of Finance. You're going to be finding or having to find 200,000.
In further years, there'll be some stub in this cycle.
So what number are you going to be trying to find then?
Whatever would cover the months that are left of the school year, or the fiscal year, excuse me, not the school year, the fiscal year, which ends June 30th.
Okay.
And to cover that, and then the board would bring their request forward in their budget. It would be part of their.
In the upcoming budget for 22-23.
Right. So they would be asking for the increase
at that point.
At that point, yeah.
Okay, so then the contract that you're gonna, if this goes through, the contract that you would sign would only be from January to June.
Yeah.
And then you would start another contract, which would go from September.
Would go from July 1st to the following June 30th. That's when the contract gets renegotiated.
So
So,
the SRO contract is still a year.
yes,
But if you were to use the state trooper that we have, you had said that his contract is 2 years.
Right, and so because we're sort of mid-contract with the resident state trooper program, they would be writing an addendum for the prorated to get us through to the
The end of the
this
fiscal.
fiscal year. And then it would be one more fiscal year, and then everything would match up for the contract. Because
But also just, and to be clear, we're from a budgeting and finance standpoint, as Nancy said, we're looking for this on a rolling basis. So our assumption is, once you get the stub piece out, this is a $200,000 recurring budget item.
which is
Right.
why we
Potential.
didn't.
That's right.
Potential.
But I mean, we're not going to come to you every year to vote on it. It's the
Right.
point.
It'd be
Right.
part of the
It'll be-
budget.
it'll be-
Budget,
And
that's
you can vote it down at that point in time.
Absolutely,
So-
but we also didn't want it to get lost in the budget. You know, we wanted to highlight this issue and give people a chance to vote on this issue. And
Okay.
that's why the $200,000 number.
Okay, so what would happen when you get to the point where you're doing the budget for next year and the budget gets voted down? What are the ramifications of a budget that gets voted down?
As far as it relates to the SRO?
Or anything, because if you don't have an active budget, then,
Well, so if this passes, this will get us the SRO until June 30th, as
Just
Nancy
until
stated.
June 30th.
But this upcoming budget season
Mhm.
would be to fund it from July 1st
Right.
to, so if you know, you have that time between the budget season and when the contract ends, you know, when you're trying to finance that new contract, if you didn't have the money to finance that new contract, then you wouldn't do that following year.
so basically the taxpayers have a yearly choice.
Essentially, except, you know, it's wrapped up in the budget.
But yes, in the budget,
Yes.
yes, you vote on the budget.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So
In a
you
nutshell.
have a yearly
You
option.
got it.
Yes.
That's
Go ahead and deny this.
And if you do a job which is telling all of us, we don't like this, we have to be responsive to it, obviously.
Yeah, and it would need to come from public comment, you know, we're highlighting, this is what we're not happy with, you know, we're not happy with this SRO, we would like to get this out of the budget, and that would be happening, you know, how many, 20 budget meetings, you know, during the season?
He loves budget meetings.
So,
Yeah.
Do my stuff.
yeah, so it'd be part of that process.
Right.
So, yes.
I mean, just technically speaking, I don't want to confuse the issue, but technically speaking, the Board of Finance cannot dictate how the money in the Board of Education budget is spent.
Right,
But
we can only cut the bottom line.
But in reality, we talk to each other, we know what they're unhappy with, what they're looking for, and, you know,
Oh, yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
communication,
I've done
and,
this inside.
and we're here, I mean, you know, we're volunteers, you know, as you know, we're residents, we love the town, and we're not trying to, you know, hurt the town, so
Right.
we're listening also, I mean, we're not trying to force something through that people don't.
All right.
But for you again, and for the voters generally, you should assume, looking at what's going to be in front of you, it's going forward, it's a $200,000 a year expense added to the budget. Maybe the first year will be a stub, but in terms of, from a policy standpoint, for all of the voters, that's actually the part that is.
Right, but the 200 could actually be more by the time you actually sign that contract for the full year.
Or less,
Yeah.
because they have found other economies in their budget to help offset the cost of the trooper.
Okay, is any part of this going to be in the selectmen's budget line?
Yes. That was, right?
So, right, so we have to figure out the details of how that, because it was a collaborative.
We're
You'd
proposing,
base it on days, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Days that they
Which is-
work, the town and days they're working for the school, it'd be
Which
proportionate.
is roughly a 70-30 split, so it'd
Right.
roughly be 140,000 in the education budget and.
Well, that depends on how many days we're
It-
buying. That's the million
Yeah.
dollar question. We're waiting on the answer.
In general.
But it's, yes,
Split and.
roughly
Yeah.
70-30.
Right. But it all goes to the taxpayers.
Yeah, it's the
Right.
taxpayers'
Yeah.
That's the
perspective.
bottom line, I understand that. It's just, because everybody's together to get to the bottom. I get it. Okay, I think that's,
Can I ask a point of clarification based on what you said, though, as far as if the contract is renewed for, I understand for 1 year, because then you were going to tie it into the same term as the resident trooper. So then does it then become a 2-year term contract?
Yes, the taxpayers approve that funding. And
Every year, yeah.
And something in the contract that says if the budget isn't passed, then we are free to be of that contract and that liability.
so I'm just gonna ask the question to Nancy, because she was here when the resident state trooper program was pulled out of the budget. How did that function?
I don't know what the length of the contract was at that time.
It's always been.
When we pulled it out, okay, so I don't know if there was a way that we could break the contract, because I had never.
Wouldn't it be possible to have the contracts alternate though? You know, one is coming up 1 year, the second is coming.
Yes, that's what I was just highlighting what Jean said, and I just learned that if we were tying it to the resident state trooper budget, that it goes to the other questions that are now being asked as far as the splitting of the money. Is it gonna be one line in the budget so that you're not gonna be able to identify it as two separate expenses? I know that that's all gonna be hammered out, but it also just puts us on what schedule of liability to this program.
Certainly, it would be in two places. It would be in the selectmen's budget as a line item, but in the Board of Ed budget that is presented to the town, not our budget, but the town budget that's voted on, the Board of Ed is one number. Yeah, but they have detail that they share, but
You can come to the finance meeting and see it. I mean,
Yeah.
frankly.
well, but it's at the,
An addendum to a contract that's gonna show as one full expense. I guess I was just trying to understand where is that dollar amount going to show and how is it going to be identified when we're looking at the operating budget, the BOS versus the, Board of Education budget.
I think it's as you were saying, the 70-30 split. There is a termination clause in the contract.
Okay.
okay, yeah, so we exercise that.
Thank you.
Oh, and come on up.
Ann McAndrew. When one of my nephews was in 6th grade, through a gross miscommunication, the teacher put the class in lockdown. And I spoke to him later on that day. And I said, Shawnee, what did you do? He said, Aunt Annie, I got on my knees and I said my prayers. And I said to my sister, one thing you're not allowed to do in school is what kept him safe. Nobody has talked about the psychological effect that a child is going to suffer by walking into school and passing an armed guard with an AR-15.
You would not have the AR-15 out visibly. Or she.
Will there be an AR-15?
Yes, but it would not be, bandied about.
Where will it be?
That we can't
Can't
discuss.
talk.
So by the time an intruder comes into the school and somebody runs to get their AR-15 and load it, how effective is that going to be?
I mean, that's a really hard question to answer because I can't, detail how that plays out. I can, yeah, I mean,
Mike,
there's all sorts of bad luck.
let's stay civil,
But I
please.
don't want to interrupt you if you're still going, but I could respond to that mental health. I hope my daughter forgives me for sharing this. There was an incident recently at a student from Salisbury made a threat online. I'm not sure, how realistic it was, but for the kids it was. So the kids heard about this. They showed up to school that morning at the high school. There was cops outside the high school. There was cops outside Salisbury Central School. She knows this kid, not friends, but kind of adjacent friends, She would talk to me at dinner about how she was following this, the kid got suspended, how she was following this kid on Snapchat because you can track location all day long for a week because she was worried this kid was going to come to school and shoot the school up. So these kids are under an extreme amount of mental stress. I'm not sure I agree that seeing a police officer is going to add to that stress. I think it's certainly in my daughter's case, it would have eased the stress a little bit.
You know, I'll be honest, I don't like sending a message that says you need a gun to be safe.
I don't like that either, but I mean, I don't know how to, I think that's the reality.
I know there are a number of school psychologists here right now. I don't know if anybody, in your data, did you compile any data about psychological impact?
Of an SRO?
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of papers about, it's more from the anti-police movement that's, been recent, that try to show that police are bad for children. I don't agree with that. That is a perspective that some people have, that police are bad for children. It stresses them out. They shouldn't be in schools. And that's an opinion. It's not one I share. I think police can be a positive, impact on children. That would certainly be the aim of the SRO if we were lucky enough to get this approved. They would be worked into the curriculum. We would expect a certain amount of engagement with the student, population, and we would hope it would be a positive role model to kind of counteract maybe some of this narrative that police are bad. Thank you.
Just to dovetail on what Scott was saying, there is the other side of that coin of what are the mental health ramifications of when a school has to go into lockdown on all of those kids. I happen to be tracking the amount of times that schools in Connecticut this year have gone on lockdown. And when you track the number of schools and student populations, you have over 25,000 kids in Connecticut just in 2022 who have lived through a lockdown situation where they have to walk through the process of being locked down. And those kids are, their mental health just from having to walk through a lockdown, be part of a lockdown situation, that's also taking a huge toll on these kids and their mental health. And so I think there's a lot of different sides to the mental health piece that are really, really concerning. And I just think that's another important one to talk about. And I know that, did you have another question?
No.
Okay, thanks. And Glenn, you had a question?
Yes, I just had something. Nancy answered most of it, I believe. So there was a time when we did not have a trooper in this town, 4 years, is that right? Or
I don't recall the number of years, but the trooper that we had became very ineffective.
Yep.
And they would not swap him out. So we discontinued the program.
Yep. So I do remember being a teacher in 2012 and the tragedy at Newtown happened. And we all got together and said, what do we do? God forbid that happens here. And we had a long discussion about what do we do? It's very difficult. So the 3 private schools got together and they approached the town, I believe. And I think that's how the current trooper program began.
That's how it came back.
So we have a trooper currently because of a school shooting. Just wanted to point that out. And I saw a lot of trend lines of things. That happened in 2012 when the trend line was down. There were 6 shootings in elementary schools. One of them happened to our neighbor right down the road, 25 minutes away. I've heard South Bronx a couple of times here tonight, even. I'm talking Newtown, one of our neighbors. So that's one of the reasons why we have a trooper currently. So my question really is this. The trooper program wasn't effective. We didn't have a trooper for a while. Did our current trooper, did he spend more time in the school because he was hired to do that in 2012? Was there more time at KCS? Was there more time there? Because if that's the case, then that trooper was more of an SRO than.
So the trooper was spending a lot of time having coffee in the Villager.
So
you're talking about the previous.
Yes.
So
a matter of fact, Glenn, I think the intention was for the latest iteration, Andrew Fisher, to have an office at the school.
Right.
But that was not.
So is it the case through time? I think you said about 4,000 calls, various incidents. Is it the case that through time, our current trooper has done less school policing than when he was hired in 2012? I mean, that might be too much of a question for this room, but is that
Right,
the
so,
case?
well, pre-me, but he was not hired as an SRO, as you know.
Yeah, he
was
wasn't,
hired
he
as a-
wasn't.
As a, to provide the activities and duties of the resident state trooper.
Okay. Yeah,
So I
just,
don't know.
just to point that out, our current trooper.
But he never actually spent any time, I mean, not any time, but never actually had an office in the school.
Okay.
You know, it never had actually materialized.
Okay.
So he does, you know, we also don't want to detail, you know, his schedule.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm not asking for that. So I just wanted to point that out.
So we're almost 2 hours into this topic. Marty, do you have another question? I'd like to just take a couple minutes break to the second topic, but come on. No, if you wanted to, because we're going to wrap up this topic.
Okay, thank you again. And first I want to say thank you to all the school board members that I serve with. I know they have a different opinion on this. And I did talk to Scott about getting data before he came here tonight. 2009, Stanford Academy, one person, 6-year-old boy, 22 caliber handgun fired a shot near a large group of students, injuring no one. Sandy Hook, 2012, 26 dead, 2 injured. 20-year-old man with Bushmaster semi-automatic rifle went on a rampage. We understand. Continue with that one. 2018, 6 years later, before another incident happened in the school, and it was an 18-year-old man outside the school fired a shot through a window. 2019, Catholic Academy. So there's actually 98,000 elementary and middle schools, another 16,000 private schools. So it's over 100,000 schools from high schools and so on. I have to correct that. Some of them outside the school, sitting around into a classroom. And that was 2019. 2021, March, Achievement First High School, someone off campus fired a gun at the school, sending it around to him. So that's been the total number of incidences that no one else could find. And I found it in 27 seconds. Here, there's a national database that the FBI has keeping. So there is data on that. Secondly, mental health. We talk about the instances really of helping students. In the incident you referred to, and appreciate your daughter, it's a tough thing to go through. So the SRO at the school, the high school, have like been.
No, there's no SRO.
There wasn't. So the response came outside of the school, tracking someone reported making a threat, and they actually responded on time.
They didn't. Yeah, they showed up that next morning.
There was no SRO actually at the school at the time. Has there been one since then because of the potential for follow-on at the school?
I think that, I mean, Jen, you can answer that better, you know, the presence at the high school, but they don't have an SRO at the high school.
But did they request a special, you don't have to have an SRO request from the state police, a special detail because of an impending potential threat?
I'm not sure what they requested or not.
We do we ask extra troopers to come down to Bulls Bridge.
Absolutely.
On traffic.
We ask them to come to Kent Center sometimes, and sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't.
Right, when they're available, and so on, and they come for what reason?
For being requested. Yeah,
You told me you had no incidents, you had no data, any incidents at the school, now you tell me you request additional troopers?
Yeah, from time to time, Michelle will request that, Andrew make an appearance,
Oh, right, and
sometimes a national issue, will cause her to do that.
Right, and in that case, we had other police have showed up at the school.
That's right.
Correct. From the Tuba L barracks.
I think what you're missing about the point you're missing from our perspective is we don't believe this is something that you can predict. I mean, I think that's the nature of these.
Correct.
Incidents.
And we don't predict when the next.
Completely random, and it's not like you can say, well, there was a shooting in Newtown, but then there was a kid outside of school somewhere else in Connecticut. So see, we don't need an SRO. I mean, that doesn't really make any sense.
But we don't say we need an SRO because of that same thing, which is what you're saying, Scott. And what I'm saying as a taxpayer and as a school board member who studied this, as a professional of 34 years. No, you're saying we need this. You just came before us in the town and said, we need an SRO.
Yeah,
here's why we need an SRO. We don't feel safe.
So Marty, we do want to move on.
Well, gee, okay, we asked for data, okay, now I'm prepared with no data, saying, I don't know. Then you call 4,000, and tomorrow morning, or Monday, I'm delivering an FOI to ask you for those 4,000 incidences detail that you just responded to, because
That's from.
you tell me you don't have them, but then you use 4,000 incidences our state trooper or our resident trooper does a year. I don't understand what that is. But if they're related to school incidences, that would be important to the school board, you know, to bolster their requirement or their request. So again, yes, as Chris said, it's the insurance, it's what's valuable, what's there. We have no protection right now for SROs at any of the prep school you work at, correct? Nothing now, even post, Kent School, same thing. They have a security, mostly campus security, like we do with teachers walking the campus, making sure the doors are closed and so on. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good.
2 quick ones. I promise. Number one, your graph. Everyone looked at the upward trends. Did anyone do a study on why it dropped in 2007 from way up here to?
It's federal, it's not their data. It's just they.
But they're using that as a trend. What about the other way?
By the way, I know that the answer is that's when the assault weapons ban was.
I'm sorry?
That's when the assault weapons ban sunsetted. That trend line did that. And it was commissioned with.
Because it dropped in 2007.
We had a drop when they passed an assault weapons ban, and then it went up when the ban expired, federal.
But it went up the next year. So
That's what I'm saying.
sure I believe that. That's happening. Okay. Number two, did you look into the cost of bulletproof glass since you said that that's what you would need?
Yeah, we did.
How much?
They didn't give us a number, but I talked with our superintendent, who was principal at Salisbury at the time, and she told us it was, and we talked to the building committee, everybody I talked to wouldn't even talk to me about it. They said, it's just out of the question. It's just out of the question.
Concrete building, it's a cement block building, so.
Not the window.
Pardon me?
Not the window.
I'm sorry.
The window, I don't understand what you're saying.
Building is a cement block.
Oh, you mean to be able to support the weight of,
No, I mean, so bulletproof glass you said you would need that to secure it. I'm just curious if anyone looked into the numbers, that's all.
yeah, I'm telling you, I did ask, and I was told by 3 or 4 people, building committee superintendent who was at Salisbury, and they did look into it, and they said it's an unattainable amount of.
They actually do the numbers and they told you.
Yeah, that's what they apparently the building
Well, I
looked
just
into it
can't see-
after Newtown as well.
Over time, that wouldn't be more efficient.
Mike, I would tend to agree with you on that one, and I kept pushing for it, but I think it's.
I promise I do.
Well, I really think it's a considerable amount of money. I mean, we're not trying to, it's not like we have this fetish for an SRO and are ignoring other options. We're trying to present something that we think is workable. And if the taxpayers don't agree, then, that's absolutely fine. So be it.
Scott, did you look into the film, the bulletproof film that you can put on existing glass?
It's not bulletproof, but it's bullet resistant, it's called. Yeah, that's part of.
Is that an option?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to take a 2-minute break so that we can shuffle the deck chairs and have representatives from the fire department come up to talk about the next.
Just before I left.
This should be quick. I hope the next one, though. Because it is what it is. Right?
Did you put it on mute? No.
I could have answered one. Yeah. It's important to have the transparency. And I'm sure.
We need more.
Yeah, really.
Nice.
We need water. Especially when it's, private jewelry. I want to stay true to my 2 minutes and we're about to. We're about a minute 30. Sit down and shut up. Is that what you say?
What we need to do is the fire. Hopeful to the fire. Okay.
Hopefully it's an easier crowd now.
You guys are gonna sail right through.
Yeah.
Does its job here.
Okay.
So the next item on the agenda is to discuss and disseminate information about the EMS staffing proposal, appropriation for $100,000. And we have the Fire Chief Alan Govel and President of the Fire Department, John Russell, here with us. And if you want to provide a statement or brief comment to the topic before we open up to Q&A. Brief.
On our PowerPoint presentation. No, just kidding.
Bring my laser pointer.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for the support, that you've given over the years to the fire department and most recent few years of where we've been in the need to go to supplemental paid staffing to pay, for EMTs to be on the ambulance. If you remember during this current budget season, we had given a proposal rather to the town to what it would be to staff at full time. The Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen had asked about the current model that we were using at the time and still are using that current model, which is where we staff with members of the Kent Volunteer Fire Department, and then we staff also with paid staffing. The current staffing company is called ERM. It's where we pay them a set hourly fee, which is $31.25, I believe, per hour for them to provide a EMT. Sometimes there are 2 EMTs that are provided for the shift. Sometimes there are 1 EMT that they provide because they team up with one of us, both John and I, ride on the ambulance and from the fire department side. And so then during the course of the current budget we're in, meaning the last budget year, if I'm saying that correctly, the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen had said, based on that current model, can you give us some other numbers or some other projections? So we did provide that. And I believe the numbers were, hold on, I have it here, but just as a point, it was, we were projecting for this current fiscal year would be $224,500 staying at that projected model. At the time, the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen and so forth felt that, maybe we wouldn't need all that. We said it's possible. And, but they said, if it does roll like that, then we'll come back and be here as we are here. But they said that if it didn't, that'd be great. But the way you're managing all the talent and all the numbers and so forth, that they wanted to look at a different number to use, which I believe was 130,000. So that was what was used. And then as we get into the first 3-6 months, of the fiscal year, they are seeing the trend that we saw would happen, or that we were predicting. Again, we still have 6-7 months to go. We're hoping that the trend doesn't stay that way. We're all working as best we can to make that happen and encouraging, members of the town to become EMTs and EMRs and so forth. And But so tonight they're looking to appropriate $100,000. Let's make sure my numbers are correct. So that would bring that to 230,000, which is right in that area of that 224.5 that we were looking at. And, I know you guys made your projections in the 100. I'm not trying to speak for Board of Finance, but trying to summarize everything as needed asked. So we're not looking for expansion. We're not looking for anything new at this point. We are letting you know that we're very proud to do what we can do for the town of Kent. We are still, you see our signs, you see people talking about volunteers and join and so forth. I can tell you that we have had volunteers over the last month, last couple months. We have just did a review on a new member for his 1-year review last night at our executive committee meeting.
As an EMT.
He is an EMT. He went through the training, became an EMT, and was just getting his sign offs to start being on his own as an EMT. So we're very excited to have, him there and others, that are looking at it. It is, I won't get off on the idea of this side, but it is a large commitment in full disclosure. And so it does take a lot of that, a lot of hours and a lot of reoccurring hours and so forth. But there are still some people that are interested in that and somehow find the time, to do that. He's retired, I believe, recently. So it's a good fit, in there. And so that's why we're here and that's what we're for. So nothing from the model that we're doing now has changed. And we're hoping, that it can mix, maybe go down the other side, but.
Well, and Alan, just to chime in with you, I completely agree with everything you've said. I think for the voters, again, on this, it is, right, go back several years and we had a pop, which was COVID related. And the fact that you kind of have two issues, right? One is, those numbers went up because we had a lot more calls, obviously. And two is, at the same time, you have this notion of there are fewer citizen volunteers available, and therefore we've had to contract out for more. And so basically, whatever it is, at the end of the day, if there's an emergency in this town, we know that we're gonna have to spend whatever we have to spend to respond to it. And I think the number that you gave us was prediction, and we said, basically, well, let's see, is it gonna be with COVID kind of flattening out? Is there some possibility there? And we didn't know. And that's why we kind of said, let's go with a certain number. And then if we have to go more, that's why. But at the end of the day, whatever.
The number of calls don't change the numbers. The way it's set up is coverage. So don't confuse the two issues.
Well, no, but he is talking about what we're paying per hour, correct?
You got to cover the ambulance.
You cover the shift.
Period.
The responsibility.
The number of calls
Could be 5
is
calls,
irrelevant.
500 calls, the requirement.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Of course.
Level
Yeah.
is
Excuse me, that's right. Yeah,
covered.
that's right. Okay.
And just since you were bringing up calls, we do have we're a little over 400 ambulance calls a year. That's where we are right now. John had just checked numbers before. That's what we're on the projection for this calendar year. Not fiscal year for you, but calendar year. So
What was the number, Alan?
right around 400, just over 400 right now. And if there was a graph, you would see that it has changed over the year. When the Kent was in activities, it was higher. Rufus, or some other people in the room might remember those days, and then, down and up and so forth. But we're right now we're on the projection of right around just over 400.
And that's up about 10% from last year. But again, your point is taken.
So the point is, we're required to cover
Correct.
and provide. So, but the number of calls is not the issue.
Right. It's so many hours in the day.
Right.
And as it goes through, yes. Yep. But I wanted people also to know that how this breaks out. In other words, where we have somebody would ask, well, what does that buy you? Or listening to some of the, earlier conversations. So $31.25 an hour is what our current contracted rate is that we're paying for a staffing agency. And that makes them provide the employee, the workers' comp, all of those types of things, right? The overhead.
30.
30.25. Okay, you're right.
And you're averaging
about 154 hours a week is the average right now that we're paying for. That the town is paying for.
When I, and thank you, Barbara, for that and clarifying me from the 3025 to 3125. We have currently, we fluctuate between 8 and 10 members of the Kent Volunteer Fire Department that are on this regular shifts per week. So in other words, there's 8 to 10 of us. If you remember a couple of years ago when I came to the presentation, I think I said, remember 12, that number 12 I was talking about. And now we're down to 8, between 8 and 10 in that area. So with the new guy coming on, that'll bring us up to 9. In the current idea of 8, meaning that's right now on the schedule for the last couple of months. One of them is a college student. He graduated from Marblewood and stayed with Kent. He's off at school. So when he's not at school, he soaks up every available hour he can, so it's a good mix. So. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but that's.
We'll open it up for questions. Not Mike.
Who else? Alan, first of all, I think it's great that anyone who volunteers is doing that. And I thank all of you for that. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm against it. Am I correct? I understand that when the ambulance goes out, so does a bill afterwards.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How much money does the ambulance bring in for those 400 calls?
Well, that'll depend on the insurance company. And there's a ceiling rate max that an insurance company will agree to pay.
What would their maximum be then?
So it all depends. So billing in Connecticut for EMS is highly regulated. And every EMS organization that wants to bill their patients has to apply annually to the Department of Public Health for a rate. The rate, I think, is somewhere in the range of $600, $600 to $700 for a BLS call. But hold on. But EMS billing is one of the most complex and complicated billing types that there is. So whether it's Medicaid, Medicare, private insurance, that's where you'll see those differences. Medicaid is obviously they're reimbursing at a very, very, very low rate. Medicare is the next highest, and then private insurance is the next. You have to, by regulation, bill every patient. When you apply to the state to be a billing organization, you don't have to send every person to collections. And by policy, local policy, the fire department will send 3 bills to someone who's a resident. But once the 3rd bill has been sent from the billing company, those bills are written off. So residents do not get billed more than 3 cycles. And that also is in the middle of the insurance process.
How about the short answer is I'll have John.
It's important to understand.
Oh, okay.
I'll have John tell you what we budget for revenue. How about that?
How about how much money was brought in last year?
That's what I was going to tell you, the
143,461.
Okay, so, and I'm sure all the supplies and the ambulance and all that costs money. My question is, in New Milford, my understanding is New Milford has they have their own full-time ambulance service.
I believe they have some volunteers on their ambulance.
Are they volunteer or
are they all?
They have a couple, they do a staffing agency like we do.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
All right, and it seems very affordable from what I've been told. I haven't been really told actual numbers, but I'm just wondering if it's worth it to go a little more and just, but where does that money goes that you collect goes into the upkeep of the ambulance and upkeep in the supplies for the ambulance?
It goes right into from the billing, it goes right into the fire department budget.
Operating.
Yep, so it's a combination of the ambulance, a combination of
The fire department budget or the ambulance budget?
It's one budget.
It's one budget.
Yeah.
So how much of the ambulance money goes towards the fire department?
It's all in one budget.
But nobody breaks it down. Nobody knows the difference.
We don't.
But that would be my first concern is, if the ambulance is bringing in money, then the money should go towards the ambulance. The fire department, I think the fire department gets money from the town as well, besides the ambulance and besides the EMT. So I would think you would kind of have it separate, but that's just my question. So, thanks.
Mike. Come on up, Deb.
Excuse me, I have a question, and it's partly out of confusion. You have now sent this to a town vote. What if it's voted down? What happens?
Yeah, that's a significant problem.
It is, it's a
Yeah.
huge problem.
Yeah.
So you must have plan B.
I think our assurance really did come from the board and we will find the money.
But that was before you sent it to a town vote. How can you not? I'm not saying it's not going to pass, don't get me
Right,
wrong, I'm not
right.
giving you bad vibes.
Yep.
But if it does, you're screwed.
That
Town
was,
would be screwed,
Yeah,
Debbie.
that's what we're gonna
That's
have
why
to
the
find.
Board of Finance said that we would
But that's,
support 100%
But I think
them needing more
your
money.
point is that we would feel awful.
what you would do is override the town vote. I mean,
You can't override the town vote.
No, what we would have to do, assume we have 100% coverage.
Right.
Which we, as a town, have a responsibility to do. Got to remember, this is an incremental number from a budget standpoint. If the town, the voters say no to it, we've still got an obligation and we're going to have to do something, frankly, I think, to other parts of the budget to find the money, which means something else we'd have to cut.
but you can't do that either.
Well, in the budget process, we can.
Oh,
Right.
in July.
So, right, but
Yeah.
so it's only,
Yeah.
you're only getting a sliver,
Yeah.
whatever again, but then that would mean to us, what we're looking for in this, again, is to say, going forward, we know that this is about $100,000 more than we have been doing. If the town says no, we still have that obligation, but in the regular budget process, we're gonna have to
Okay.
take some
But in the-
drastic moves to make up for it.
In the interim, you.
That's right. And that will be a transparent process and the town will know about it during that.
But that's July
That's right.
1st.
That's correct.
I'm talking between now and July 1st. You
Right.
just kind of.
We would meet with the Board of Selectmen and figure out a plan.
Yeah, we'd have to. Yeah, we'd have to vote.
Good
Yeah.
question.
We'd have.
Not cover
That's
it.
right.
Yeah.
So whatever way this goes, the town will spend the $100,000 in essence.
Not necessarily an extra $100,000. It would
But-
be a matter of going to the paperclip account, because I'm sure there's lots of money in there.
Okay, thanks.
You know, pull out the first ambulance rickshaw.
Right.
Who knows?
Other questions? Concerns? I feel weird not saying I'm scanning the room.
Right.
Two-dimensional room here. No other questions? Donna, come on up. I think there should be like a wall of fortune.
Hi, Don Hayes again.
Hi.
Have you guys taken into account the fact that High Watch has more additional beds? And that Birch Hill is going to be starting their construction soon. So how is that going to affect what you're going to be doing to your budget for the new fiscal year?
We have not, we're just finishing up working on the new budget. In the process, it's not been approved by the membership yet of the department. So we are looking at that. But part of that is then it would be a increase in call volume. But the staffing is, as Rufus pointed out, when there was
Still gonna
the
need
thing
to be
before,
staffed.
you need to have a regular staffing for what it goes through. And at some point, it may reach, I do not believe that those increases would go to the level that Mike was just, when he was talking about New Milford. So New Milford staffs 2 ambulances, because of their call volume and their size, and obviously big difference than Kent with staffing agencies and some volunteers, but mostly the staffing agencies. And so they're going through that thing now. So I don't see that we would be jump to a volume like New Milford has, you know what I mean, in that case. So we do see an increase in call volume projected, just as you're pointing out, and as you know, from all the processes in your former position. We are looking at that currently because High Watch went into their new addition during the year we're currently in. So we are looking and monitoring that to see how that affects our call volume. There's a balance in there because more call volume, Mike asked, I'll go back to you, Mike, because you asked about billing, right? So that means more calls more billing. So you have more, so it's not a true offset, but if you've already got your base, there's a little bit here to help with the supplies and the fuel and, all those other things. Our ambulances run on diesel. Mike talked earlier, remember, about diesel and the cost. So there's all of those things that, that come into play. So there is that trying to find that balance of where it is. And at some point, the call volume gets such that all of a sudden you go from one ambulance paid staff or paid volunteer staff to two, you know what I mean, to that setup.
Have you looked at the possibility of making the ambulance a full-time paid service?
We have
What's the cost difference between paying the 30, was it 30.50 an hour, whatever?
2025.
And what you would have to pay if you were to make it a full-time paid employee-ish person?
John has, as president of the corporation, he has appointed a staffing committee within the department. And so they're evaluating lots of avenues right now to see, as we did a few years ago, and I think Mary Ann is here, she was ambulance chief at the time when we went to this model and was in charge of the staffing committee then. So we have a staffing committee now that's evaluating to see, is this using a staffing agency where we're paying 30/25 currently? Is that the model that still makes sense and keeps going? Should we look at a model where we maybe have somebody of our own employee, where they are an employee of the Kent Volunteer Fire Department? So there are different models like that right here around us. You referenced, or New Milford, is they're using a staffing agency. There's North Canaan, which is, similar to us and so forth. They do a combination of a staffing agency and an employee of the department itself. So we continue to look at that, continue to monitor, see how things change and where they, go about.
Would there be a difference in the cost if you were to do like a North Canaan kind of program?
All the data isn't back on the setup, but I can give you in general, and people can make their own, idea or whatever, that a general range for the worker, the EMT, is around $19, $20, $21 an hour, right in that range. So let's say $20 an hour is what they get paid per hour to work in the ambulance. We're paying 30/25 to cover any benefits that they're paid, the taxes, the work, right, all the other stuff in there. So you could take that and try to make an assessment or a judgment in there. In other words, the EMT is not like a career firefighter in a town of, let's say, Ridgefield, which is not too far from here and so forth, where they have career firefighters, or the city of Danbury. And the city of Danbury obviously is, a much bigger department. So into that setup. And those are cross-trained paramedics and firefighters, which is different than an EMT, level. If you remember, when we talked about this, if we had to go to a staffing agency where we had two EMTs, full-time, we were in the $500,000 range of what that cost is at $30 an hour. So just as a number where we are, and that's why we are, at the two, whatever, but so we're working so hard to balance and keep that, that number in there.
Also, one of the things, Donna, just to keep in mind with the staffing agency, it's that turnkey approach. So that EMT comes to us and the staffing company is paid for their training. They pay for, like Alan was saying, their liability insurance, their professional insurance, workers' comp, everything. They also pay for any retraining. They pay for vacation days.
So
and then
temp agency.
Yeah, exactly. And then they also they do all the HR management of their staffing. So the trade-off would be the fire department would then need to, build that infrastructure within the department or however, whatever model.
And Donna, to your point, in other words, is one automatically ruled out? No, we chose what we felt was the best bang for the buck, excuse the expression, but in that cost versus benefit a few years ago when this started, only a couple of years ago. And then that's why there's a committee continuing to look at it and to take into account some of those things you're talking about. High Watch has expanded a little bit. Is there any other thing that's going to expand? Is the other center going to get, underway? What's going to happen? When's the impact of that going to be? what's going to happen to the 8 to 10 of us now, you know what I mean, that are doing this? How long are we going to be able to maintain this? Can we get more, volunteers that will be able to offset? Even going to expand that into the regional approach. In other words, instead of just each town having their own ambulance, can a town, even though it's geographic, there's quite a distance, but can they share? And so forth. So those are things, and that happens in the area. Those of you may know, like New Hartford. New Hartford Ambulance doesn't just cover the town of New Hartford. It goes into the Heartland and the Barkhamsted areas. And so those are some of the things you may recently know in the past few years. More close to us is Morris Litchfield. So Litchfield goes into Morris. And I know the Board of Finance has talked to us before about regional approach and so forth. So those are some things also that are being looked at to see what that can be. There's a lot of heated discussion that happens when people say, well, I want an ambulance in my town, and so forth like that. So it's,
So then when you come in for the budget process starting in January, will you be asking for what you asked for this year plus the 100,000?
That number has not been determined. As I said, we're working on our budget. Right. But I do not see any decrease at this point in time from what we asked originally for this fiscal year. So that would mean it could be, I don't see it being any less than what we had asked for at the.
Which was the 2 and change.
Which is the model that we were doing as it came to the end. Remember, we originally asked for the town to fund, not that we're necessarily spending, but to fund the full amount. Basically, so as Debbie was pointing out, so we're not here at a town meeting, the money would be in the town, coffers already appropriated.
Right.
But as we discussed, the reasoning and stuff behind it and trying to make a budget work for taxpayers and mill rates and so forth, that's, your guys' area. A thing that also should be pointed out is that this EMS funding is different than other budget appropriations. Please, if I make a mistake, correct me, but it's a reimbursement. So in other words, the money doesn't go to the fire department and then it's just there in a budget item. The money goes only when an invoice is sent. Correct, Barbara? And it's a reimbursement process. So that way the money stays at the town, the money stays in the setup here. It's a budget number. It's not where it goes into the fire department like our other grant, process that happens or another area of a town budget for a department to work within. It's a reimbursement. So once the money's spent and those people are there and they worked those hours, then that invoice goes in. Correct. Yes.
But the money's got to be there in order for the invoice.
Well, in order for them to pay the invoice, right? The money's got to be there. That's right.
Right?
Yes.
So then there's a possibility that with the budget for 22-23, we could be getting hit with an additional $300,000 with the 200 if the SRO goes through and another 100 if the fire department determines that they're going to need that extra. So we could be talking $100,000.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, and to just, again, to focus on this, in other words, is that the 230, I do not see that. There's nothing that's happening right now, right today that I can predict to you that says that, come in January, I mean, a couple months from now, that number is going to be less than that 230. There's nothing that I'm seeing that would make that less. That's, the minimum based on the current formula that we were using and putting everything together that we told to the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen before. And to answer your question very straightforward and bluntly, I don't see that changing on the lower side. It may change on the higher side with all the factors that we talked about. And as we put our budget together and the same thing to make recommendations, for the town, but I don't see the actual expense being any less.
Okay.
Yeah, the Board of Finance, part of the rationale for cutting it was that financially, the way it was financially trending, we couldn't swallow that large a nut.
Right.
Which is why we cut it. Yeah.
Any other question?
Keep it flat.
Righty. So the third item on the agenda is sort of a wrap up. which is the, to consider and discuss the questions. So the questions are related to obviously two topics that we just discussed. So we'll, I don't know if the Board of Finance has any statements or if we just want to go to Q&A. I think this will be fairly short.
I think we've talked it all
Yeah.
pretty well in depth at this point, yeah.
One round done. Any questions on the questions? Fantastic. So it is according to Apple, 9:26. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Glenn? All those in favor? Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you. Thank you. You. Never mind.